So as per usual, this is about this meeting. A call is being recorded. And attendance at this meeting is in accordance with the code of conduct for Open SSF and Linux Foundation, as well as the antitrust policies. So let's get started. Welcoming new friends. I see at least one familiar name, unfamiliar name. Does anyone want to introduce yourself? Right. If not, feel free to either post something in chat or update the meeting notes just to say hi. Um, we are curious to oh, okay, I guess yeah, a little bit shy. Uh, cool. Um, I thought we were gonna expect the agent today, but looks like he's not able to make it. No, he's not here yet. There was only one. I added one item on talking about what Robbie and Alex and folks are thinking about with the OCI collector changes. Um, so I can talk a little bit about that. Any other things that folks want to talk about?
I don't have anything myself, but I do have to leave in a few minutes for an appointment. So if there's anything that you want my input on, we should put it at the top of the list.
Um, I guess with the recent Open SSF announcement and the sharing of the blog posts, has there been any interesting conversations that have come your way?
Not much, just sort of the usual trickle of people popping in to say hi.
Okay.
We did had somebody in the general chat who seemed interested in the space generally and mentioned GUAC specifically. So I told them to, they're already in the GUAC channel. I told them to, go ahead and ask as many questions as they want so we can help them out. But
Jeff, hi, Mike, anything to add? Gender?
No. Not from my side. I had a chat with Part last week on model transparency in GUAC, but it's the same as we were talking on 6.con.
I mean, the only thing that's maybe worth seeing if we can kind of pull in at some point the folks from HPE who have been using GUAC internally to do some stuff, and really, so for Jeff, last week, since you weren't here at the community meeting, somebody from HPE actually was using GUAC to internally to actually help out their legal team understand various license risks. And they were using GUAC plus the clearly defined stuff. And one of the things that they were interested in, and I don't know, Ben, I didn't see anything show up, but I also wasn't paying super close attention. She said she was going to open up an issue. If she didn't, maybe we should chat with her just to, because again, I think it's like, we have no problem creating the issue ourselves, obviously, but having somebody who is outside of the normal group throwing an issue in there always looks good. But she had brought up that she wanted she was using it to do license risk stuff, and in particular, she said one of the things that she would love is she's like, I want to have the ability to essentially have an SBOM. I want to create a new SBOM that is essentially the, GUAC has a bunch of data that maybe is corrections, maybe it's fixes, maybe it's whatever. And I want to, go in and actually modify all that. And like, yes, and the answer, like, I don't necessarily think the answer has to be, I throw a thing at GUAC and GUAC comes back with a better SBOM. It could be, I throw an SBOM at GUAC, I get back a bunch of results. I take those results to bombctl or protobomb or any other tool, and now I get a different SBOM. I don't necessarily think it has to be all in GUAC, but I think that sort of thing was there was a lot of interest in that idea, which I think other folks have also brought up in the past as well.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think analyzing the graph or like, doing cross SBOM analysis is good in GUAC, but we haven't thought about how do you collect up a group of nodes and say, make an SBOM out of this or something like that. I think would be interesting. I think if you want to take an SBOM as is and modify it, then it's best to do it without GUAC, like the tool that I released for clearly defined. So yeah, I think there's some use cases there, but probably the interesting part is like once you put a bunch of SBOMs into GUAC, how do you create like a project out of those for what you're going to put into it? Like if you want to export an SBOM or something like that. But I don't think any of us have put enough thought into it to have a good idea on like what would be the right use case. So somebody has some ideas.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. And I probably agree where like there's probably another agent that would like ask GUAC a little bit more about, oh, what license is this? So like, is this a resolved license and things like that? And then handle the modification to the SBOM. If the SBOM lineage is important to them, right? Because I think one of the things we do is we normalize and we kind of change the data model, right? So we're not going to be able to recreate the original SBOM. I think this was definitely like a question that I think Kate from SBX was asking early on. It's like when we started ingesting the depth of depth data, it's like, can we just upload the SBOM and then get a new SBOM back, which is potentially higher fidelity.
Yeah, a few folks have asked us about that. I think that's probably so there's two parts to that, which like I think we need to dive in a bit more on. One is I think we need to figure out from folks, what are they actually looking for? Like why do they want a better SBOM? I think is one of the questions. And the one I've heard that seems to make sense to me is I generate some SBOMs and I'm about to give this SBOM to a customer or to somebody who is not an expert in SBOMs, right? Like somebody who's not an expert in software. And I want to make sure, is this up to date? Is this all the information they need? Because they're not going to go into GUAC and run an API call, right? And so in particular, the thing that, because I know Ben had to step out, but the thing that was being discussed during the community meeting was I have lawyers looking at these SBOMs. And so there's a couple of things there. One is they just want to be able to like scroll through a list, like they want like essentially SBOM to Excel spreadsheet, but they want to make sure the SBOM to Excel spreadsheet, like they don't have to then go into, oh, I need to go here and copy this data in. They just want to be able to go and have one view in one document, which makes sense. And so that sort of use case makes sense. The other use case, like some other folks had said, you know, oh, can I have the SBOM live alongside the artifact? And this is the most up-to-date information. That one I find a little bit less compelling, because if that artifact sits, like if I have scorecard data as metadata in the SBOM or something like that, that might not be accurate by the time I've deployed it. But certain things like the licensing probably is not changing. Certain things like the actual software composition shouldn't change, other than maybe it's enriched a little bit. Yeah. And also, like, that's where, like, again, folks have said, which this makes sense to me, is there's like a few different flavors of SBOM. Like there's the it never changes software composition analysis SBOM. And then there is the SBOM that is more of what HPE was asking about, which is like, I need to generate a report SBOM. And that SBOM is being used as a, when I send you this report, this is all the stuff we found, and this is all the stuff we know about.
Yeah, we had a lot of discussions about that when we were talking about the defect stuff as well, because they were like, oh, we're gonna put CVs in the SBOM. It's just like, it doesn't make sense. But they're using it as a, like you said, a statement, right?
Yeah, I've always approached or thought of SBOM modification. I've always seen that a little bit suspiciously. Like if you start modifying SBOMs, then you won't be able to guarantee the integrity of the SBOM. And I suspect that it's also going to be a process that's like wildly inaccurate. I think as we've seen with some things previously, because the full context of the build is only, or of the artifact is only available when the SBOM is being produced. So maybe there's these things aren't as important if you're producing like a report SBOM for like some use case, but I don't know. Yeah, I think that would have to be approached carefully.
Okay, so the action item for that one is to follow up with I don't think I mentioned a name, but follow up with HPE to see whether they can open up an issue on that. Right. Is there a desire to continue the generation of SBOM topic right now, or let's wait for a little bit more from HPE on that?
Well, I mean, I think we need to kind of decide what we're doing on the GUAC side. If we're going to be creating SBOMs, and if we're going to be modifying, if it's more like a modification of existing SBOMs or something that is done kind of from the graph without a specific SBOM, for example. Like, I guess I'm saying, like, we need to decide if it's within the scope of the project to take a single SBOM and modify it with GUAC data. Or like, if it's like, oh, we ingest the SBOM, we enhance it, we create a bunch of nodes and we output it. Is that the kind of thing that we're looking at doing? I don't think it is, personally. The other idea would be like if somebody wants to use GUAC to modify an SBOM, maybe it's not an ingesting it, but it's just a separate tool that parses the SBOM, queries GraphQL, and then rewrites it. For example, if it's non-ingested, which I don't know if that makes sense because it would have all the data would have to be there. But yeah, like getting, of course, yeah, getting more information makes sense, but I think it's going to be a question is this even the right path to go down with GUAC itself, or at least the GUAC first version of GUAC.
Yeah, so I do think that there's like, that's where I think having the ability to, like, again, this is where I think we might just talk to the bomb. This sort of thing is what's on the bomb CTL folks's roadmap. There's some practical things of like some of what some folks might be asking for could just be like, I run some JQ, I pipe it into this thing, I sort it, and then just throw it into some JSON. Like that I think is something that, like, it could be a shell script for some of the basics there. But I agree that, like, at least the generation of the SBOM itself doesn't necessarily belong in GUAC. In fact, I would sort of avoid, like, I'm okay with it being within the GUAC family of tools, but not within GUAC, this like API and whatever, as where we threw out, too much stuff in one tool is my concern.
I think I echo the same thoughts too. I think I'm thinking about it as like, oh yeah, like not saying SBOM, but like the SPDX graph is an output format, right? Where we could take the ontology data model and then convert it to an SPDX type document. But it would be kind of just like an exporter. Like we could take this and export it as a spreadsheet. Although that's not something I would personally do.
Yeah, so yeah, and I think that makes sense as something that's like, it interacts with the GraphQL API. Like we have the point of the project is the API, right? Like people can interact with it and add whatever they want. And if somebody if we want to have a tool that reads the graph and does an export, I think that's would be pretty cool. I think, what was I going to say? Is that the right use case they want? Maybe not. Like, does that solve the problem that this HPE has? But I think that's what we would want. I agree that's what kind of like the direction that we would want for our project.
I think it gets a little bit circular, right? Because I think at some point the whole point of GUAC is to consume all this data so that you don't have to like deal with the different formats, right? So I feel like exporting it back into the format and then giving it to other people is a little bit of a bit of a loop, right?
Well, that's why I don't think it
like-
would make sense to try to export like one SBOM because you had that going in, right? But if you're trying to use GUAC to like put multiple SBOMs together into a bigger graph and export and have the exporter like have a way to define what the graph is that you want to create a document for. You're like creating new documents that didn't exist with subsets of a graph or merged graphs. That's what GUAC would be good for, right? But if the use case is I have an SBOM, I want the exact same SBOM, I want to put it into GUAC and take it out of GUAC with the exact same SBOM, it's probably not the right use case.
I think that's another aspect of it that I'm thinking about the complexity of it, right? Because I think what Mike said around like, oh yeah, someone could just write a shell script with JQ and just like make a query to depth.dev or clearly define and like hack something together in an afternoon. And if something's doable in that way, then I don't think it is something that is a core functionality that we will provide.
I mean, that's exactly what I did for clearly defined outside of GUAC, which is it was like a few lines of protobomb to read a SBOM and then query clearly defined and then write an SBOM.
Gotcha.
It took more than an afternoon, but it was in a shell script.
Figuratively, you know.
Yeah, I know, I'm joking. Yeah, so you know, I agree. Like, yeah, it's very simple to, and it's higher fidelity to not, you know, throw the SBOM into the GUAC graph and then try to pull it out.
So is it, I guess, is it right to say that, like, based on the discussion here, that after talking to HP, let's see whether, you know, can they use our output format directly? Or is there just a easy way for them to use our output format? I don't that they're not gonna be in the business of the SBOM generation to be exactly the same as like containment.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that also came out of that was I'm blanking on her name again, from HPE, Ria. So Ria, she mentioned herself, she's like, hey, I am not a developer, so as far as that's concerned, I'm not super familiar. She said she did want to bring in potentially some engineers from HPE. And again, like, this is where I think the thing is going to be, she's probably not going to be bringing in folks who are going to want to write a bunch of Go code to pull in a bunch of stuff, but she might bring in folks who are like, oh yeah, I wrote a very quick and dirty Python script that takes the GUAC output format, merges it with an SBOM, and this is the thing. And then I think that's totally fine to throw in as one of those, like, this is something that, you know, we're not necessarily is supported per se, but like, it's a community sort of thing, and we think it's, you know, worthwhile. And then if enough folks start to say, oh my gosh, this needs to be an actual tool, then we can kind of cross that bridge. At least that's my thinking.
I just found my email from Gary that they had been using this tool called Parlay for this exact use case.
Yeah. So Ria said that she also used Parlay.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember what she had said.
Well, the license data isn't as good as clearly defines. It's just,
yeah, I think that's pretty much what she said. She's like, she's like, I'd probably use Parlay if the data coming out of Parlay was better.
right. Well, they're getting it from this ecosystems project.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, and she admit, you know, and in the notes, I think it's, yeah. Parlay uses a different. Oh no. Yes.
Yeah, and that's why they're switching. Gary's trying to use my tool for clearly defined right now, because for the same reason, like the license data.
Yeah.
So maybe, yeah. Parlay requires a sneak API token.
Yeah, I'm looking at the data inside. Looks pretty interesting. It's kind of like depth of depth, I feel. Do you wanna move on to another topic? Okay. So Pav and I met with the folks from Microsoft, Robbie, Alex. I don't remember the rest of the people's names, but we talked a little bit more about their particular use case. So their situation is that they have SBOM generation at build time. They create an image, they upload the image to GUAC, the SBOM of the image to GUAC. But they also have this system that duplicates the image or mirrors the image in multiple registries. So they want to be able to say that this SBOM that we uploaded for this image it's the same SBOM that should be associated with all these other mirrored images. So the trouble there is the SBOM generation is done for that one image, and then it gets uploaded, but within the SBOM it says like this is for image A, in this particular registry and this particular hash. So they want to capture two pieces of information. One is that this SBOM also exists for this other image in this other registry. And two, being able to associate that there's this image that lives in multiple registries. So we chatted through multiple proposals. The one that we settled on is that so SBOMs today that get ingested point to the artifact hash. So it will be the image SHA-256. But right now we don't have an association that this particular image is in multiple registries. So we talk about making changes to the OCI collector to say that whenever it sees an image with a digest, it will create a document to ingest that says that it's a predicate to say that there is an occurrence between an image path and it's contained a digest. Makes sense so far. Yeah. So in a sense, that does the image association, but it is also an added feature where we kind of get, at least internally, we call ground truth information to say like, we know that this particular image with this particular hash existed at this point in time in this registry. So that's the proposal. They had an additional thought that instead of just creating the attestation and feeding it in, that they would put the attestation back into the registry. This is something that we pushed back on because it seemed very involved and way too much power than we would want to be responsible for having write access to the registry. But to them it didn't really matter as much because they were owners of the registry, right? So I think their code runs in that trusted computing base, and I think they have a little bit more control over the access there. But yeah, that's a proposal. I think that's a issue that's open. Let me find it so I can link it.
What does the attestation look like?
That's something that we have to discuss. So I think there are two options that we talked about. One of them was having a so-called like in total predicate for like a GUAC.sh namespace. and to say like basically map is a predicate for the ontology type predicates, right? So you say is occurrence, you're making a statement that this thing is the occurrence of another. And that would be attestation. The other alternative that we talked about was to have the predicate be to the information that was being provided, right? So in this case, like saying it's a label that this image or this artifact was found as a like ground truth predicate, for example. I think we haven't settled on that. So I want to, I guess, hear some opinions on what we think. All opinions about the architecture, which are those here collected. I guess to start, are we opposed to having a GUAC.sh namespace predicate?
No, I think we should probably have so my thinking around some of this is general idea makes sense. There was okay. I'm trying to think what to say while this is recorded. So I think the way I'm thinking about it is idea makes sense. There's probably certain things that we probably want to be not in the guac.sh namespace, probably owned by something other. Like it's like, hey, this seems broad enough that it probably belongs somewhere else. With that said, I also think that that conversation is so much of a larger one that I would just say for now, throw as much as we can into the guac.sh namespace, and we could always change it later. If something says like, oh, why is this in the guac.sh namespace as opposed to just purely in whatever? That makes sense.
I think I view it as like I view it as like we are just prototyping stuff, right? I think this is stuff that we are trying out. So
Yeah, yes, that seems fine.
Yeah, the overall architecture sounds good to me. I think it makes a lot of sense to have like there probably will be other uses, other internal GUAC uses or attestations. Other usage for internal GUAC attestations, where different pieces of the system need to pass around information. In that sense, it may make more sense to do to have a predicate with the ontology in it. Although I'm not sure if that transfers the responsibility of creating the data model from the assembler to the collector.
yeah, I think that's a good question, right? Because then I guess you would still have to do validation to make sure like it makes sense. Like what comes in makes sense, right? I'm wondering how easy that is. Like,
Yeah,
like can we confidently be able to say that we are whatever that comes in is not gonna be junk? Because we don't have the context of which people create some of the decisions.
yeah, and you don't have the context on the what. Like ideally, you would want the context on what led to the creation of that ontology, right? Which if it's already in the data model, you know, how.
Do folks have any thoughts on opening the floodgate on that versus we're just gonna say one particular use case, do it by use case?
Can you repeat that one more time?
So are we gonna, so we have two options here, right? One of them is we say that we're gonna open up, we're gonna let you decide what you want to ingest into the GUAC ontology based on your understanding of the GUAC ontology. And we're gonna validate that to the best we can, but you know best, and therefore you define what goes in. Versus saying that, oh, I want to capture this very specific one use case that we have. So I'm going to say, oh, this is an OCI collector or some type of collector saying that I've seen an observation of this artifact existing in this URI location. And then we'll translate that back onto the ontology.
To be precise, in the first case, it's not like the user of GUAC who decides. It's that code would be in the OCI collector. Right?
Yes, but then I think we open it up to anyone creating that decision.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So again, I think the thing that we had sort of discussed early on was, so right, like the challenge is always going to be, how do you make sure that GUAC is still like, are we able to do what we need to do with it if we allow folks to just like really poke at the ontology in ways that maybe we didn't anticipate? Now, and then the answer could be, yeah, no, like that actually is pretty reasonable. While folks recognize that that's not necessarily like the way, and I know we had this discussion early on, is like it feels like there's almost like a funnel or like a pyramid or something like that, where like you have a core set of things that are, this is what GUAC and the GUAC experts, the maintainers, know about, and this is their focus. There's then going to be things that then map into that focus. So like those are perhaps like the collectors and things that you could say, like just as a thing where we might say software identifier is part of the ontology, right? And as long as you say, hey, this is a software identifier, you can map into that. Now there are software identifiers we understand, like Perl and SHA-256 or whatever. But if you come in with like, no, we're coming in with the Acme software code, that's fine. You can say that's a software identifier in the ontology, but understand that we don't really have an understanding of that. And then there's a sort of like a third, much larger bucket of like, you want to define your own sort of labels and that sort of thing, and own metadata. And that is something that we could also support, but then that just makes it like you're essentially creating your own, like, you're building your own supply chain ontology at that point. So I guess the question I have is like, are we letting folks just map into the ontology, or are we allowing folks to modify the ontology?
I think in this case, it's like they're mapping into the ontology. We have decided that it's going to be is occurrence.
I do think that the desire is to do the mapping, but I think the implicit thing will happen is like the whole thing where like users will do what users do, right? Kind of like modify like what it means, like certain things mean in ontology. like go around if we don't put the correct guardrails, right, they're going to end up using it in the wrong way or in a way that we may not intend, right? I think like the first thing that I can see already myself getting a headache around is like we do so much work in terms of like trying to understand the identifiers that come in SBOMs, and then there's a high chance that someone's going to just take the SBOM, going to take the identifier wholesale and just put it in, and would that affect our ability to map onto to like so-called the clean data that we have it. But I agree where like if we expose the mapping and we assume we have a good user, I think that's I think I think that's a favorable case. Oh, sorry, I cut you. You would say something about the mapping.
No, how it seems in this case that the user is aligned with a GUAC ontology, so we don't need to support like a custom like them labeling things or like defining their own ontology through another mechanism. But that still doesn't answer if we want to like at the end of the day we want to keep using the existing ontology for this use case, but that doesn't answer like, well, we want the user to just give us that like pre-made, like give us an is occurrence attestation or struct or whatever, or and then we just put it in the graph, or if they need to give us like whatever underlying evidence they have, and then we parse it and interpret it. I guess the trade-off there is like one is more generic. If we can just like take in the ontology, that'll serve for more use cases, but at the risk of people misusing that feature and leading to data quality issues. If this is the first use case of ingesting like an ontology predicate, then maybe we can just avoid that and only go to the more generic solution once we have more use cases down the line, and if we need to.
I guess Jeff and Puff, Mihai, do you have any preferences on which offense? Is it not specific predicates or just having a predicate for the entire ontology?
I would go with the predicate for the entire ontology, so mapping to what we already have until we find out that this is very specific, very different than the existing ones, and we can get into confusion if we force a mapping. Because otherwise, if everyone can define their owns, we'll have multiple predicates with kind of similar meaning, and each time you have to write a query to determine is this predicate or this predicate or this predicate, and then all the queries in the backend will become slower. It's going to be a lot of tech debt that comes up out of that.
But I think I had a different understanding. How we wouldn't change the data model we wouldn't change the ontology. The use case specific predicate would be translated by the assembler into the GUAC ontology.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
If I understand, yeah.
if the backend and the GraphQL doesn't change, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Starting about the in total predicate. So I think I mean creating a separate in total predicate, right? I mean, yeah, we do that for licenses and other things, right? So as long as the parser knows about it, right? How to if it can use a standard, that's I mean, we talked about this in the meeting, right? It's like if they can create an in total predicate and then they can upstream it, that becomes a standard, then we use that, right?
Yeah, sorry, I was overloading the term predicate. So I don't know if it
Okay.
made sense what I said.
So Puffy, so Mihai is leaning towards having the data model, the predicate be the in total predicate be the ontology data model. I think Puff, you're more leaning towards having a specific predicate because that gives a easier path towards upstreaming that predicate
Right.
in the future. Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, we keep the same data model, right? We use the has metadata, all that kind of stuff that we talked about, right? Nothing changes from our side. It's just that, you know, we have a different parser or something that just takes that information and parses it into our ontology. But just having a specific in total predicate, like, you know, all the certifiers, everything should be creating some kind of an attestation. So this should be an attestation at the end of the day in the in total predicate type, and then just being able to ingest it.
This is a contentious discussion, so Jeff, your viewpoint on this.
No, I don't really have an opinion here.
Okay. Sounds like we're kind of in a split here. So I think my thoughts, since we also don't have that much more time, is to let Robbie propose something and then see how we feel about it. And then we continue the
Well-
discussion there. It's a little more concrete.
I mean, based on our conversation with them, I thought we ended at a good spot, didn't we? I thought, or was any kind of
So we discussed to have like the specific predicate, right? When we tried, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Sounds like we don't have agreement yet.
What's the bad thing that would happen if we went with the wrong decision here? I guess. Or like, what are we blocking? Are we blocking?
I think until I think our decision will not really have an effect until they productionize it. And then that means that we have to support that predicate until we decide to deprecate it, and then they are able to move off it.
Yeah,
Or we have both in the meantime.
thinking from data perspective, I think until we have like a public data set that stays on, we can always deprecate and add back predicates if needed.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it's better for Robbie to just have us pick one, flip a coin, or to talk it out. Or go with the proposal. I guess the proposal would be the next step anyway, right?
I think based on I forgot exactly where we landed, but I think based on what Pop said, it sounded like we did say our recommendation was to do the specific attestation. And we are kind of like two split, and Jeff. So, I think if none of us, it sounds like, you know, like Jeff said, like it's potentially a two-way door, right? So we can come back and revisit this at some point.
Another consideration here, which I think is similar to discussions that were happening in the Toto attestation community, is the question between like more specific predicates or one predicate that you can fit a bunch of stuff into. It seems that the second approach is being taken a little bit more, or you probably more context, Parth. But that relates to this, because if we define an ontology predicate and start using that, then like we could just fit, like a collector can just fit everything into there. But if it's more specific predicates, then they could issue multiple predicates for different things, multiple attestations for different things. And that it has implications for I think for processing.
Doesn't that kind of go back?
Yeah.
It goes back to that question that the predicate dictionary, right? That we were talking about at the beginning. Is like, how do we make it generic enough so that we can process all the stuff without and create parsers?
It's like we had this conversation this morning about pearls and how they're generic, but they are so generic that you can't it's difficult to work with them. But yeah.
Like I feel like, you know, like with attestations and stuff like that, I don't think there's going to be a finite number that are going to be useful. Like I don't see people, especially like for GUAC and stuff like that, I don't see people going crazy and creating attestations for like, oh, I have like an infinite number of attestations. I think there's going to be a set number that's going to be like, I want this, and I want this, like, you know, and then maybe we support those high level ones, and then we just don't do the other ones for now. Like that might be good enough. Like if we go too generic and we try to support everything, you know, like I think then it's, you know, it's going to be all over the place. Like, do I care if it's a reproducible build? Like, do people care to create an attestation for that and like store that into GUAC? Like, I don't know. Like maybe I feel like there should just be a finite number that we support. And then based on use cases, you know, we add more. Like based on like, hey, the community comes back like, yeah, I want to add this kind of particular use case, then we add it in.
So it sounds like for this, let's wait for proposal. If none of us feel strongly against it, I think we go with it. Otherwise, if you feel strongly against it, then we'll bring it up and have a continue the conversation.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, it seems like if Robbie's the one deep in the weeds and been thinking about it the most, you know, maybe he can kind of do a little bit. I mean, there's a good amount of text in these issues, but like if he can present to us what his idea is and why, then we can talk through it.
All right, we are out of time.
Yeah.
See you. Marco and I probably won't be around next week because we are going to be traveling. Well, sorry, no, I will be around because I'm going to be traveling. Oh wait, sorry. The following week, not next week. Sorry. So never mind, just forget what I said.